History happened everywhere.
The verdict.
This is our after-show podcast where we look back at the most recent episode, episode 88, Nutrition in China during the 2nd century. So if you haven't listened to that, do go back and check it out, or else there are going to be some spoilers ahead.
Wow. Blah, blah, blah.
Hello, my name is Ryan Weir, and I am here in the HHE studio with the spicy rice to my shriveled noodle. It's Mr. Peter Goddard.
I am Spicy Rice. I'm nice and spicy and fun and all those good things. And you indeed are a wet noodle.
I thought shriveled noodle was right, but I'll take wet noodle. That's better. And we are joined as ever by the dreaded dragon of debasement. It's the judge himself. It's Mr. Paul Dursley.
I think I would be chicken feet.
Chicken feet.
Actually, this is almost as if you planned it, of course, because you know 8 is a very auspicious number in Chinese.
Yes, and 88 was the episode number, which was a remarkable coincidence. Yes, so hopefully the gods are smiling upon us and Lady Luck is on our side for that golden A we're expecting.
No. I could disavow you of that straight away.
Okay, now Peter, I have spent the past week sleeping off a supper of mysterious superfruit, and as such I have forgotten everything that you talked about in the last episode, so would you mind reminding me what happened in, let's say, 60 seconds?
I can do that. When would you like me to start?
Do it now!
We took our taste buds on a tour of China, the land of expensive plates, great walls and tasty pandas. We learned about the Confucian rules that declared feeding the people a key tenet of leadership, and the concubine turned empress who put it into action and became much loved as a result. We discovered China's secret superfruit, the Jujube, and we delved into traditional Chinese medicine to learn about hot and cold foods, and took a peek into the golden cabinet of a Han Dynasty physician. It was delicious, it was nutrition, it was China between 100 and 200 CE.
Last week's episode done, summarised nicely, nice one son. Now we're over to a young Dursley who's gonna tell you what he thought of thee. He'll take you apart without any care. He's the lovely Paul Dursley, the lovely Paul Dursley.
My goodness, what an episode it was. I felt incredibly full after the episode, like we'd had a deliciously succulent Chinese meal.
A succulent Chinese meal?
It was amazing, but it doesn't matter what I think, Peter. We are here for the opinion of just one man, Judge Dursley. So, Paul, before we get to the final verdict, why don't you give us your first thoughts on episode 88?
I think that Peter, after the last aberration, is back on form.
Oh, ooh. Wow, that's strong.
Yes.
But the base was very low.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Details.
Peter, first thoughts.
I enjoyed the episode. It was quite difficult to do. I mentioned in the episode that the research was quite difficult because there was so much obfuscating because Chinese food, so many Googles were just bringing you back the nutritional value of various Chinese dishes today, Chinese restaurants. So I was really surprised by how hard it was to do, actually, I must say.
There is an element to doing this particular podcast, which is the entertainment value, right? We could just sit here and reel off nutritional facts about China, but at the same time, we're looking for human stories. We're looking for stories that are going to entertain, that are going to take you in a slightly unexpected direction. It's tricky when you don't find those.
That's absolutely right. What I found was I had a lot of information, but as you say, it would have been incredibly dry. There was what was really lacking, and I think it's partly because of the topic, was stories, as you say. I think we both enjoy something where you're telling a tale with a bit of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and not just saying, this is how people ate in Han Dynasty China. And that part of it I found really challenging, I must say.
And Paul, this was an episode that had a fairly standard place, time and topic, given that over the past couple of episodes we've had some rather extreme ones.
Yes, I'm pleased about that. I think you're back on track.
It's good. Is that going to be reflected in the marking, though? Because given it's so straightforward, surely it makes the grading a lot harder.
I don't think we should be influencing the judge at this point. Thank you very much.
I was asking a question. Just asking a question.
Can you repeat the question?
No. He's trying to influence the judge. Wholly unacceptable behaviour.
Right, Peter, let's kick off this episode of The Verdict with a little bit of further information that I was able to research around Panda Meat.
I was going to ask if I could have a guess.
How did I know that you were going to talk about bloody pandas?
Your commitment to the panda munching was impressive,
But
I must
pandas
say.
aren't very nice animals at all.
Yeah, they're quite aggressive, aren't they?
Yeah,
They are presented as being soft and cuddly and fluffy, but they are indeed bears. And people do forget that. There are many accounts, certainly over the past sort of 20 odd years, of pandas that have attacked tourists at zoos that have decided, I'm just going to go in and give it a hug, which is a terrible idea. They have the bite force, like 4 times the bite force of a human with sharp teeth. Their back molars are 7 times the size of a human's tooth. Basically, if it gets hold of your leg or your arm, your skin and your muscles and your tendons are coming out. It's not a little nibble.
So, public information advice, don't hug bears.
But yeah, don't go to a zoo and think, I know what I'll do.
I would have liked to have thought that was things that didn't need to be said, but apparently so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, look, so we did talk about, you were talking about, obviously, top Chinese foods, and I mentioned panda. You ridiculed me.
I did ridicule you, and I continue to do so.
and rightly so, it turns out. So I looked into it. Panda meat, is that a thing? Like, is it like some delicacy that you can go to China and have in some small little rural village, a little panda burger or something? So there are some excavated panda fossils which have cut marks in them which show that humans used to, at some point, hunt the pandas and eat them. But since then, there's been no real tradition of eating panda. They're kind of seen as sort of semi-deities, mini godlike creatures, gods of the forests. There are many rural ethnic groups in China which just consider it forbidden to even really go near the pandas. Ancient Chinese people used to hunt pandas for their pelts, their fur. Apparently they believed it was good to sleep on. It would help ward off ghosts. They also said that it would help regulate a woman's menstrual cycle. But one of the interesting things that I found about that was that while they wouldn't eat the panda, they would imbibe the panda through its urine. It was said that they would swallow panda urine to dissolve a swallowed needle.
That raises more questions than...
How many people are swallowing needles that they needed like some sort of medicine for that? But there you go. Panda urine apparently will dissolve metal.
Yeah, maybe one of those cravings, that ladies get before they give birth.
Yeah. So I did find one reported case of a Chinese person eating panda. It was in 1983. There was a 26-year-old villager named Leng Zaizong. He was out hunting deer and pigs out in the forest when he accidentally snares a panda. Now, this panda, though, was wearing a radio collar, so it was being tracked. And he saw this and he knew that he was going to be in trouble if he got caught with it.
For a moment there, I thought you meant he was like wearing like a Walkman and headphones.
Yeah, like listening to the radio.
It was a man in a onesie.
Yeah, and so he decided he was going to get rid of the evidence. And the best way to get rid of the evidence is to chop up the panda and give it to his wife to cook stir-fried with some turnips. So apparently they sat down, they started to eat their stir-fry panda, but it was so inedible that he fed some to his pigs and he gave the rest to his sister, which it says a lot about his relationship with his sister, I suppose. He pleaded for forgiveness to the judge. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison. It has since been raised to 10 years in prison. But there is one other case, too, of eating pandas that I did want to talk about. And this was in May 1929. And 2 brothers, Kermit and Theodore Jr., do you know who they are?
Oh, Roosevelt.
That's right. They are the sons of American President Theodore Roosevelt. And they became the first Westerners to shoot and kill a giant panda. It was part of a hunt that they were doing across multiple different areas. So they went to India, China, Tibet. Sort of sport versus science trip where they were looking for animals but also trying to shoot them at the same time. And so they were in China. They went up into this forest, and in an interview later, Kermit admitted that he had found the panda after only 4 hours of tracking for it. He said that he discovered the beast taking its noonday siesta. So my brother and I approached carefully, fired simultaneously, and got him.
Doesn't seem very sporting, does it?
Yeah, so according to their account, they took the panda to a nearby village where they skinned and butchered the animal in a hayloft before cooking and then eating it. The local guides who were helping to support their mission, they refused to join in either carrying the panda or eating the meat, even going so far as to call a priest in after the butchery to purify their hayloft afterwards. But unfortunately, even though they wrote a book about it when they got back, they never said what panda tasted like.
Boo, that's no way to treat history.
Why wouldn't they say? I don't understand.
I don't know, I guess they just never wrote it down. That wasn't the bit they were interested in. So I looked into it a little bit more. I thought, well, what would it taste like if you did have a bite of a panda? So it is assumed that it would probably taste a lot like, well, regular bears, brown or black bears. They were
I like the way you say that as if, it's probably like black bear, isn't it?
Yeah, we've all had a muck black bear burger. Yeah, well, apparently they were eaten a lot in America during the 18th century. Mm-hmm. And the meat is described as similar in flavour to beef, but darker and fattier, and supposedly full of tapeworms too. But the flavour of the animal's flesh is often dependent on the diet that they consume. And it's said that brown bears, which mostly eat salmon, taste worse than black bears, which forage for berries. Giant pandas consume mostly bamboo, as I think most people know. In fact, 99% of their diet is bamboo, the 1% being sort of the occasional rat or bird or fish that they come across. So it's unlikely that panda does taste like the other bears. However, there is still a chance for those of us out there that want to taste a panda. And they reckon that it might well be possible very soon.
You say us.
I'm including you guys in those. There are advancements in lab-grown meat, which mean that in the near future, there are companies that are going to be working on developing all sorts of exotic meats, including giraffe and panda.
Wow.
So you could have a panda burger.
Finally, dare to dream, Ryan.
I think you've found your next job, Ryan.
Panda wrangler.
Panda taster.
Well, from what I can remember, it tastes horrible, like a very weak Coca-Cola.
Are you referring to Panda Cola there by any chance?
Yes.
Well, Ryan, I also was interested in the consumption of panda, knowing that you were going to bring something up today, so I had a little look into it as well. One of the things we said was it's probably really illegal, and indeed that is the case. Giant panda is on the Tier 1 National Protected Animal List in China, and under Chinese Criminal Law Article 341 Clause 1, illegally killing the national protected animal is a felony that could get you imprisoned for 10 years and a fine.
I mean, but would it be worth it?
Well, as you say, apparently it doesn't taste very good at all, so I would guess not.
Yeah, I think that's the turnips you put with it. I hate turnip.
Yeah, what a weird thing to choose.
Well, I suppose if you're already eating panda, what goes with it is of secondary importance.
Or that lovely Chinese food, and you sort of pick a turnip.
Don't know what they did with it, do you? Could have been an amazing 5-spiced turnip. So, Ryan, the last episode, there was actually a few things that we said we'll pick up on the verdict. So I've got a few things that I brought back, having followed up on them. So one of the first things was when we were talking about the jujube fruit, you were saying, is it the jojoba?
Yeah, it's very similarly spelt, isn't it?
Similarly spelt, similarly sounding, completely different thing. The jujube is a Chinese fruit, as we know, that you can eat. The jojoba is also known as the goat nut, the deer nut, the pig nut, the wild hazel, the quinine nut, the coffee berry, and the grey box bush. And it's a shrub that comes from the southwestern United States, actually.
So what, it's not a berry or something?
It's not a berry, but it is grown and it's used in things. So you've heard of jojoba, I think, in probably shampoo form, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's commercially used for jojoba oil, which is a liquid wax ester, which is extracted from the seeds, basically. So Native Americans used to use jojoba by heating the seeds and softening them up and then squashing them up into a salve or a sort of butter. And they put that on their skin and their hair to heal and condition the hair. And also they used it to treat burns. But it was a seed. It wasn't eaten. Apparently, some people would suck on or chew on the seeds, pregnant women, because it was supposed to help with childbirth. And apparently, hunters would eat it on the trail to forestall hunger rather than as a food. So it's not really a food. It's much more of a seed that is used on a sort of topical basis rather than a food. And funnily enough, the research I was doing, almost everything I came across said, don't confuse this with jujube. Are very, very different things. So there we go. Now we know.
Yeah. Well, because we keep saying jojoba, but it's spelt Jojoba, isn't it? So Jojoba and Jujube is very close.
Exactly. And I think probably at this time, Ryan, it's probably worth explaining to some of our more baffled listeners what that sketch was about.
I almost don't want to, because the minute you explain it, it then becomes not funny. And I think we can all agree it was hilarious.
I think it definitely was. Let's keep the mystery then.
If you want the mystery... I think the word becomes was not needed.
Well, if you are curious, all I can say is watch Pink Panther 2.
Yes.
So another thing you asked about, Ryan, was the century-old eggs. You said they 100-year-old eggs. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
They're about 3 months old, aren't they?
Well, yes. So there is a thing. What you were referring to is called the 100-year egg, right? These are century eggs, also known as alkalized or preserved eggs. They are not 100 years old, to clarify that, first and foremost. And as Paul says, it is they are quite old. They're processed, and it's a form of preservation originally. So what would happen is you preserve either a duck or a chicken or a quail egg in clay, ash, salt, quicklime, apparently, and rice hulls. And for weeks to months, depending on the method, you store these things. And I guess the chemical processes transform this egg into this remarkably different looking thing. It's still egg shaped.
Isn't it black?
Yeah, the yolk becomes a dark green colour, sometimes a grey, and apparently has a creamy consistency and strong flavour. And the white becomes dark brown, a translucent jelly with a salty flavour.
That doesn't sound appealing, I'll be honest.
Well, they look horrible, I would say as well. But apparently they're tasty if you're into that sort of thing. But they are quite safe to eat if they're made properly. They don't have bacteria or mold. It's believed that originally that was just a way of preserving eggs that was developed, that then over time, obviously things tend to become a delicacy, become used to them. You like the flavours develop. So the process gets improved and the flavours change. And nowadays they're an actual delicacy, which you can imagine something that takes weeks to make would be.
I mean, yeah, if you're having to bury your eggs and they come up black after several months, you're going to give it a little try, aren't you?
You would, especially someone like you who wanted to nibble on the 4,000-year-old noodles.
I still want to nibble on a 4,000-year-old noodle.
There was one thing I found, though, which was worrying. Apparently, some unscrupulous producers can use lead oxide to speed up the reactions to create these century eggs, which is quite toxic. So be careful on who you choose to provide your century eggs, would be my advice.
Wow. I also read that century eggs are being taken into space. They're vacuum packed and sealed and sent up for astronauts to munch on.
Really?
Yeah, apparently the vacuum sealing obviously makes them last for a long time. So maybe there'll be millennia eggs. Who knows?
I prefer pickled eggs myself.
Not sure I've ever had a pickled egg.
Oh, haven't you? They're quite nice.
Ryan, what's your position?
My mum always ate pickled eggs and I couldn't stand them. But I do like a poached egg.
Yes, I think that's the best way to prepare an egg, actually, poached.
Really messy, though, and quite hard to get right. But when it goes well, mwah.
Yes, my father told me a trick that Nigella Lawson told him.
Personally, or like
no, he watched it on a
he
watched it on a television program, but I think he's got it in his mind that she personally told him.
Okay.
And what you do is you break it through a tea strainer, and then all the runny liquid goes away, and the snotty stuff, which is what you want, stays with it, and you then plop it into the water, and it does work quite well.
There you go. Top recipe advice from HHE Podcast. You're welcome, listeners.
So, Peter, there was a lot of very interesting things that you talked about in the episode. That being said, I did want to do a little bit more research on pandas.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
So I was curious about pandas and how they started to come across to zoos. Like, when did people start becoming aware of pandas? How do they end up being like the face of WWF? Well, from a Western perspective, they sort of came into focus in around the 1860s. There was a Lazarist priest named Armand David, who was a missionary in China, and he was studying hundreds of sort of species of birds and animals and things. And in March of 1869, he stumbled across a hunter who had upon him the skin of a young giant panda. He hadn't seen anything like it before. He asked what it was, and the guy went, well, look, have a bit of it. So he cut a bit off, gave it to him, and he sent that specimen along with a bunch of others to Paris, where apparently it remains today. He sent it with a note that said, I have not seen this species in the museums of Europe, and it is easily the most pretty I have come across. Perhaps it will turn out to be new to science. In 1916, a German zoologist named Hugo Weigold, he claimed to have purchased a panda cub from some Chinese hunters, but he wasn't able to present evidence of it because he said it died soon after.
Yeah, I went to another school.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't know it. In 1929, we talked about the Roosevelt boys. They go out, they kill and eat a panda. And news of their adventure starts this whole race of explorers looking to bag a panda of their own and bring it back to America. By 1936, there are a dozen specimens that are now mounted in museums across America. But again, no one had brought a live one back. And that brings us to an American businessman called William Harkness. Now, William Harkness was in 1934 in China to capture a panda. But unfortunately for William, he hadn't applied for the correct permits. So he had to wait for up to an entire year for approval from the Chinese government before he could enter the forest to try and get one. Now, during this year, he fell ill with cancer and died. So he never actually ever even got into the jungles to see if he could capture one of these things. So back in the United States, his widow, Ruth Harkness, she decides that she is going to realize her husband's dream. She said, I inherited an expedition. What else could I do?
What else? I mean, I cannot think of a single other thing like not doing that and enjoying my widowhood.
Well, yes, quite. So Ruth, who is 36 at this point, she is now a widowed socialite with zero wilderness experience. She goes out, she starts to learn
the hankering for panda.
She quickly learns the basics of expeditioning. She secures the necessary permits this time. She assembles a team, including a 22-year-old Chinese hunter and guide called Quentin, with whom it's rumoured she fell in love with. Together, they leave America for China, and they start their hunt for the panda. They arrive in Shanghai. They head into the interior of the Sichuan province. They face several weeks of rugged terrain, terrible weather. They're searching these remote areas for pandas, and eventually they find an abandoned cub, which Ruth nicknames Su Lin, which apparently in Chinese means a little bit of something very cute.
That's nice. I like that they've gone all out for the panda hunt and they just had to just scoop it up in the end.
Yeah, they just picked it up off the floor.
There's one.
Yeah. Either way, Ruth and Quentin and the rest of the team, they managed to care for this young panda cub long enough to bring it back to America, where she arrived at New York's Grand Central Station and was photographed getting off a train, holding Su Lin in her arms, feeding him with a bottle of instant milk. That photo hits the newspapers and Americans go crazy for pandas. 3 months later, Ruth sells Su Lin to Chicago's Brookfield Zoo, and within 6 months, 300,000 people travel across the country to come to the zoo to see him, including celebrities like Helen Keller and Al Capone. So Su Lin, the panda, is in Chicago Zoo. Other zoos start to see all these number of people coming along, these tourists go into the zoo and paying money to come and see it. So they're like, well, we want our own panda too. And so there becomes like this race for explorers to head out into China and try and bring back as many pandas alive as they could. So by the mid-1930s, 6 more pandas are imported to American zoos. 2 more at Brookfield in Chicago, 2 at the Bronx Zoo in New York and 2 at the St. Louis Zoo. Each become top attractions. By the 1950s, the Cold War means that Americans are unable to go panda hunting in China. Basically, the Chinese government just say, no, off limits to the Americans. We're not doing that anymore. In fact, in May 1958, they put a panda up for sale, but the government said that no sales would be made to America. The object of this ban, they say, is to deny United States dollars to communist China. The next panda to come to America was in 1972, when the Chinese government gifted 2 of them to US President Richard Nixon, who you mentioned, Peter.
I did, yes, Nixon in China.
And since then, they've had pandas in zoos in America.
Well, that was, I don't know if that was the start of, but there is a thing called panda diplomacy, where China gives gifts of pandas to various countries. I don't think they do it anymore, but the giving of a panda was a diplomatic act, and so panda diplomacy is a thing.
I think it's more of a lease on it. They can ask for them back at any time.
Imagine having to write a letter to a government saying, can we have our panda back, please? How does one go about phrasing that?
Well, didn't Edinburgh Zoo have to send its pandas back?
Really?
They put it on the train, didn't they? The Panda Express. No?
No. Well, why Panda Express? I don't understand.
It's a restaurant chain in America.
Oh, well, that's why I wouldn't know then.
Right. End of section.
Good.
And so, Peter, we have come to the end of the line. It is time for you, sir, to step into the dock and prepare to face the people's judge.
Dun, dun, dun.
Judge Dursley, are you ready to give your verdict?
Yes, I am.
Then will the defendant please rise
Certainly.
and bow?
Absolutely.
It feels appropriate, doesn't it?
Kowtow.
I was just going to say kowtow.
Your Honour, as usual, may we start proceedings by first asking for your verdict on factual content.
Well, as you know, I quite like sort of the factual ones where you're talking about nutrition and the foods. So, as I said, I think you're back on form. I enjoyed all of the facts.
Yes.
Okay, well then may I ask for your grade for factual content?
I am afraid I'm going to have to dock 1 point for the ridiculous assertion that the Olympics were held in 2007.
Whoa. Did Peter get something wrong?
Yes, Peter got something wrong about the Olympics.
I misspoke.
I'm just going to push this button here.
Peter got it wrong. Peter got it wrong. Peter got it wrong. Peter got it wrong.
Yay!
Okay.
I haven't heard that in a while.
I was on the brink. It's ironic that I still managed to get it wrong, because when my first pass I went through, and I had actually accidentally chosen the year of the Winter Olympics, and I was just about to do the bit about how many medals people had won, and I was like, Norway's got the most medals. This is insane.
All right, may we have your grade then, please, Judge?
I will give, including the docked point, a straight B.
Yes.
Wow.
Results.
Okay.
That's good.
Would have been a B+, but I'm afraid I cannot let that pass.
I understand.
Then, Your Honour, may we turn our attention to entertainment value. Were you entertained?
Guess by the facts. I have to say I wasn't that entertained by some of the sketches this time.
Fair enough. What about the witty banter between us?
He struggles to recall.
Was there any witty banter?
And your grade for entertainment value?
I'm afraid this is where I'll mark you down a bit. I will give you a C.
Tolerable.
Okay, right then, we move to the inimitable, the mysterious Dursley factor.
Well, as I've alluded to earlier, I think you're back on form after your disastrous Juniverse escapade. So I enjoyed this one, as I said, back to form.
Even with the error.
Don't mention the error. You don't have to keep reminding
No,
me.
I didn't remind it.
Well, at least Pete only had one error.
Okay, and the final and the grade for Dursley Factor, please.
Okay, for that, I will give B-.
B-. This is good going, Peter, I've got to admit. Well done, sir. But before the judge passes his ruling, Peter, you have an opportunity to enter a plea. If you choose to do so, which would be foolish, I may add, you should make that plea now.
Oh, no. I know when to keep stum, my friend, and this is one of those moments.
Okay, then, Your Honour, the defendant stands before you. Have you reached a verdict?
Yes, I have.
In which case, I would ask most respectfully for your ruling.
Okay, Peter, thank you for this episode, and as you can probably tell, I'm moderately amused by it. So I shall give you a deserved B-.
Peter, I got a B-. Peter, got a B-.
That isn't a sting. That doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
Thank you very much, Judge.
Well done, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, well, look, there you go. That is the show for this week. If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things that we've talked about on this show, or just to say hello, you can reach out to us on social media through our website at hhepodcast.com or by email at peteandryan@hhepodcast.com.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and you might even end up featured on a future show.
That's right. One way to definitely feature on a future episode is to rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your recommendation there really goes a long way to bringing the show to new listeners. And I do have to thank Keb, who consistently keeps grading us 5 stars, Peter. This is going to become Keb's verdict versus Judge Dursley's verdict soon.
Oh, well, Keb is I think Keb is the more important factor in all of this, I would say. Now, if you're on Mastodon, Facebook, Instagram or X, you can find us at HHE Podcast. And if you follow us there, you'll get an alert every time we post trivia, news, photos. The last thing we did was a picture of the noodles from 4,000 years ago.
Still want to eat those. But we are going to be back again soon with our next episode. Episode 89, Peter.
No.
Mind the Gap in Oceania during 1644 to 1912. But in the meantime, a huge thank you to the judge himself. Thank you, Paul.
My pleasure.
And that's it. I guess all that's left to say is...
The wise man listens to... Okay, Ryan, there was one other thing that you said in an offhand manner when we were talking about the history of China and the chap named Puyi, who was the last emperor of China.
Yes.
And you said that must have been a thing, isn't it? So I looked him up a little bit more, and actually, he first became emperor at the age of 2, apparently.
Okay. There's a history of that, though. You were talking about that early on.
yeah,
weren't you?
Exactly, we're quite old compared to the other one, yeah.
Wasn't he also Emperor of Manchuria?
Well, yes, funnily enough, this is a bit of a yo-yo emperor. In 1908, he becomes emperor, but in 1912, so by the time he's a grand old age of 11, he has to abdicate. But then he was briefly restored again to the Qing throne from the 1st of July 1917 to the 12th of July, also 1917. So he manages to get another 11 days on the throne.
Yay!
Before he's sent off again. But then again, aged 24, as Paul says, in Manchuria in 1932, the Japanese invade. They create a puppet state called Manchukuo, and they choose a new emperor. Puyi gets back on the saddle. He's like, you know how to do this. He's like, yeah, I know this. I'm an old hand at it.
But when you're looking at CVs being submitted, right, he does have the most experience.
He did have of being emperor of China. He was far and away the most qualified candidate.
Yeah.
But of course, then in 1945, Japan surrenders again. Puyi's on his outs again.
Didn't he die in France?
Well, he flees the capital and he's eventually captured, and he was prisoned and re-educated educated as a war criminal for 10 years in China. So I don't know about Paris, but apparently his time in prison apparently changed him. He was deeply regretful, and he died in 1967.
Wow. So you didn't become like emperor of the prison yard?
Probably. He had 3 good goes at being emperor, which is quite impressive on its own.
I haven't had one.
I know. When's it my go?
Right, when did we get a go? You were talking about the courtesan Deng Sui and how she became emperor.
She became regent. She wasn't empress. She became empress briefly, but her husband died, so she was regent for most of her rule.
I did a little bit of reading around courtesans, and it seemed like the sexual part of the job was a relatively small part of the job, that they were mostly there for entertainment, dancing and singing and such. But they were very well paid.
Well, the other thing that I didn't bring to the table, but was interesting, was, and I don't know much about it, was the role of eunuchs in the Chinese court, because it kept coming up that whenever there was a rebellion, all the eunuchs would be targeted for some reason. So as far as I can make out, there were some kind of advisors.
What's it like being a eunuch, Paul?
Bollocks.
Or not, as the case may be.
Now, this is an interesting wine. This wine is 39 years old, and I haven't tried it yet. I'll give it a sip.
And what is the verdict?
It's better than all right, but when I took the cork out, the cork just disintegrated, so I had to push it into the bottle.
Oh
Dear.
So that's why I was worrying, but it's actually not too bad.
Sure. Okay, here we go.
Hello, lovely YouTube folks. This is a special message just for you.
Yeah, thanks for listening all the way to the end.
Now, if you enjoyed the show, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
And don't forget to take a moment to hit that like and smash subscribe.
Hit that like.
Yeah,
Smash subscribe.
yeah, that's what people say.
Do they, though?
Yeah, only the cool kids.
And you think you're the cool kids, do you?
No, we're the cool kids.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we are. All right, smash that like button, people. Smash it real good.
Oh, yeah. Nice.